Okay, so like Hannah said, thank you guys for attending today. This is going to be a session mainly on interest and capitalization and everything that kind of has to do with that. My name is Olga Guadarrama, and I'm one of the financial aid counselors. So first, let's look at what we're going to talk about. And this is a quick 30-minute session too, so it'll go by pretty quick. Types of federal student loans, how are federal student interest rates determined, history of the interest rates for graduate borrowers, a look at origination fees, how the CARES Act impacts your federal student loans, how does interest accrue while you're in school, what happens during the 6-month grace period, how does capitalization affect your loans, how are monthly payments applied in repayment, the traditional versus the income-driven repayment plans, why postponing payments can be a costly option, and then finally, what is student loan refinancing? So first, types of federal student loans. So the main loans that you guys will get attending RFU will be the ones on the bottom, which is the Federal Direct Unsubsidized and the Federal Direct Grad Plus. These loans are considered unsubsidized loans. They're categorized as unsubsidized loans because they do accrue interest from the date of disbursement. The ones on the top, the subsidized loans ended. They were no longer available to graduate students after July 1st, 2012. So at one point, those kind of loans were available to graduate students, but the government decided they no longer wanted to do that, so they ended that a couple years ago. The Federal Perkins Loan Program ended on September 30th, 2017. That was a flat 5% fixed interest rate loan that didn't accrue interest while you were in school too, but that program ended as well. The only one that we still have that's a 5% loan is the Federal Health Profession Loan, also known as the HPSL, but that one is need-based, so not everyone gets approved for it, and it's only for podiatry and pharmacy students. That loan particularly right there is interest-free while in school and during the grace period. So that's the only basically subsidized loan that you can get, unless you're getting some type of institutional loan and you're like a medical student. Then there's other institutional loans that kind of work the same way. But since we're talking about federal ones here, I'm not really mentioning those. These are just kind of like federal loans. So how are federal interest rates determined? So this is the projected interest rate for 2021. Luckily, we just got that projection this morning, which that's kind of what I was waiting for to finish the presentation. So we do have information that says that the potential interest rates for 2021 beginning July 1st of this year will be 4.30 for the direct unsubsidized loan and 5.30 for the direct grad plus loans. However, the big thing to keep in mind is that because your loans are dispersing before that date, for the summer quarter, you guys will for sure have the old interest rates, which is 6.08 for the unsubsidized and 7.08 for the grad plus. However, our office is currently talking about reprocessing students so that you guys can get the better interest rate for fall, winter, and spring. We just need to figure out how we're going to be able to do that because obviously, it's better to have a lower interest rate than a higher interest rate. But we can't do anything about the summer quarter because these interest rates that were just announced today do not exist for anyone until after July 1st of 2020. So they change every July 1st. So next July 1st, there will be new rates that come out. And usually that always gets determined in May based on the 10-year Treasury notes. As you can see right here, these the Treasury notes, I guess, were at a 0.70%. And then the add-on was 3.6, which ended up resulting in the 4.30. And then on the bottom, there's always that special add-on that gets added on, which is what mainly determines the interest rate for that year. So it's all based on, obviously not credit. It's just based on the market, basically. So history of interest rates for graduate borrowers. So also just want to mention that if you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, send them on over to Hannah. She'll respond to them if she can. If not, we will get to them at the end of the presentation too, just to make sure we finish on time. But just so you guys can kind of see, since 2006, which is when Grad Plus loans kind of started, you can kind of see the different interest rates here. They started at 6.8 back in 2006 for the unsubsidized loan, and the highest for the Grad Plus has been 7.9%. As you can see, it's never really been in the 4 and the 5% range until what it's projected to be for 2021. So the interest rate is going to drop significantly. These interest rates also do have caps, so basically they can never go over a certain amount, and that amount is 9.50 for the direct unsubsidized loan, which is still a very high percentage, and 10.50 for the direct Grad Plus loans. So that just basically means, even if they do that whole calculation and it ends up being higher than that, they just can't go over those certain percentages. But yeah, this is kind of just so you can have the history of the interest rates from 2006 basically until hopefully 2021. This is a detailed look into origination fees. So you guys should know that your student loans, both your unsubsidized and your Grad Plus, do have origination fees. That money goes directly to the Department of Education, and as you can see here, the Grad Plus has much higher loan fees. So they're 4.236 for the Grad Plus, 1.059 for the unsubsidized loan. And I put some examples here so you can kind of see based off the same amount. So someone that borrows $20,500, when they take the loan fee for that amount, it's only $217 for the unsubsidized loan. However, on the right-hand side, if you take someone who borrows that same amount for the Grad Plus, they actually end up paying $868 in loan fees. And then just so you guys know, those loan fees get taken out of your loan automatically, so there's nothing that you need to do in order for that to come out. Once the loan is actually applied to your student loan account to pay for your tuition or any charges that are on there, that money will have already been deducted from the loan. However, it's very important to know this because, even though here you may borrow $20,500 and only get a little bit less than that because of the loan fees, you are responsible for paying back the $20,500. So the loan fee is like a fee that you pay. You still have to pay interest on the full amount borrowed, even though you didn't get $217 of that. As you can see on the bottom, my note here, the Grad Plus origination fee is 4 times higher than the unsubsidized loan fee. So if you take 1.059% and multiply it times 4, you actually get to the 4.236. So that's why it ends up being a lot more there. And the origination fees do change slightly every October 1st. They don't change as much as the interest rates do. So they only go up a little bit or a little bit down or a little bit up every October 1st. So how does the CARES Act impact your federal student loans? So the main thing for you guys is that you are going to have a 0% interest for 6 months on all federally held student loans. So if all of your loans are direct loans, you are going to get a 0% interest from March 13th, 2020 until September 30th, 2020. Of course, that means that after that time, your loans will again continue to accrue interest, but in the meantime, you won't be accruing any interest during that period of time. Also, for students that are in repayment, for them, their loans have been suspended. Like they don't have to make any actual payments during this time because of the CARES Act. So the same date, September 13th to September 30th, they don't have to make any payments. That happens automatically, even if they're on auto pay. And if they're trying to go for forgiveness, like income-driven forgiveness or public service loan forgiveness, these 6 months of suspended payments are going to count towards that. But like I said, for you guys, that doesn't really matter because you're barely, you're probably in school right now, or a continuing student or a new student. So that doesn't really matter too much for that. So how does interest accrue while in school? So the main thing, of course, is that interest does begin to accrue only on the amount dispersed. So say, for example, you took out that $20,500 loan, and the amount dispersed for the summer quarter on that unsubsidized loan is only $5,125, which is 1/4 of the $20,500, because you're attending 4 quarters. So typically your loans are always split up into 4 quarters. You would only at first only pay interest on the $5,125 because that's all that's been dispersed on your account. But you can always follow this formula to figure out your interest. So it's the interest rate in decimal format multiplied by the current principal balance and then divided over the number of days in the year in order to get your daily interest. As you can see there on a loan that has a 6.08%, 5,125. After that 5,125 is dispersed, you would be paying a daily interest of 85 cents. At the end of the year, once the full $20,500 is fully dispersed, then you would be paying the $3.41 on the bottom. So you do accrue, the interest does accrue as the loan is dispersed. So it's not so bad while you're in school because you're not getting all of the money all up front. It's being divided up usually into the 4 quarters. And then again, remember that you're not going to be accruing any interest during the CARES Act time, which is 3/13/20 to 9/30/2020. So an easier way to do this, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't like doing math either on paper or I'm trying to save myself time. So this Excel sheet will be accessible to you guys in that website that Hannah's telling you about, the FYE website. And you'll be able to go in here and plug in your numbers. As you can see here, I put in the 5,125 on the top at the 6.08%. And you can see all the way on the right-hand side that it says 0.85. That's your daily interest there, 85 cents per day. And then on the 20,500, once that's fully dispersed, it'll be $3.41. So this is really helpful. I use this all the time when I'm trying to figure out like how much interest is going to accrue, especially for the graduating students. This really helps, and it has a lot of lines. So even if you have a lot of loans, you can put in all your loans right here and then figure it out. So what happens during the 6-month grace period? This is pretty straightforward. Of course, because these are unsubsidized loans, they do accrue interest the entire time that you're in the grace period. So the unsubsidized loans will continue to accrue interest. Your Grad Plus loans will also continue to accrue interest. You can make voluntary payments during towards your outstanding interest during the 6-month grace period. If you're trying to pay off your loan in full, it may be in your best interest to do so. If you're trying to pay off your loan as quickly as possible and with paying the least amount of interest, it probably would make sense to pay your outstanding interest. And you can do that during your 6-month grace period because technically you're not paying any interest on the interest that's accruing on your student loans until it capitalizes, which brings me to this. How does capitalization affect your loan? So after you guys graduate, all that outstanding interest has been kind of sitting on the side. They won't add it to your outstanding principal balance until 6 months after you graduate, or 180 days after you graduate, which is basically the same thing. So in this example here, let's go on the left-hand side where you have someone who borrowed $120,000 at a 6.5 fixed interest rate, and they accrued, let's just say, $10,000 in unpaid interest. Their daily interest on that $120,000 only is $21.36. Their monthly interest on a month that has 31 days is $662.47. Their yearly interest is $7,800. The total interest paid over 10 years is $43,509.09. And then on the right-hand side, you can see here that if that $10,000 is added to the $120,000, now they owe $130,000. So now they're paying interest on interest. So their daily interest goes up to $23.15. Their monthly interest goes up to $717.67. Their yearly interest goes up to $8,450. And the total interest they would pay over a 10-year repayment period would be $47,134.84, which results in paying more interest in the amount of $3,625.75. So yeah, capitalization does make your loan more expensive because yeah, you're just paying interest on interest when you go into repayment. But of course, too, if you might be going for income-driven forgiveness at the end or public service loan forgiveness, it may not be a good idea to try to pay the outstanding interest because the more interest you end up paying off, the less that's going to be forgiven at the end. So that's why usually I tell students it may be a better idea if you're planning on paying off the interest to at least not consider it until the 6-month grace period, because at that point, at least you'll have a better idea of, especially if you're a med student, like, are you even going to be doing your residency at a qualifying 501c3 place that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness? These kind of things are unclear when you're an M1 and M2, or if you're in a pharmacy program and you're still not really sure if you're going to do residency or not. It may be better to wait and figure out how things are looking until you have a better idea of what's going to happen. So when does interest capitalize? Usually it happens after a deferment and or forbearance, if you go into one of those, after the end of the 6-month grace period or 180 days. If you voluntarily leave some of the income-driven repayment plans, which include revised pay-as-you-earn, and the IBR plan. If you fail to annually update your income for the income-driven repayment plan, so for those plans, if you're paying based on income, you do have to tell your loan servicer how much money you're making the following year and your family size in order for them to update your monthly payment amount for that year. And the last thing is if you're paying your loans under the pay-as-you-earn or IBR plan and no longer qualify to make payments based on your income. That one's a little bit harder to get to because you'd have to probably be making a good substantial amount of money in order to not have a partial financial hardship. So I wouldn't worry about that one too much, but the 4 top ones are very important. So how are monthly student loan payments applied in repayment? So this is pretty simple. When you make a payment every month on your student loans, first, it's going to go to any fees. So if you have any late fees or anything like that, it's going to go to that. Second, it's going to go to any accrued interest for the month. And then third, it's going to go to your principal balance. So that's typically the way they always apply payments. And it's very important for you to know that. And that's why it's also very important for you to know how much interest you're accruing daily, monthly, and yearly. Because if you don't kind of understand that, you may not know that out of your $300 payment that you're paying, $250 of that is going towards the interest, and only $50 is actually going towards reducing your principal balance. So it's always very important that you understand how much interest you're accruing, so that you know when you're making a payment, basically how much of it is actually bringing down your balance. One of the reminders I have on here is that if you sign up for auto pay, you can receive a 0.25 interest rate reduction, but this won't be until after you start repayment. So you can't do this while you're in school. You would have to sign up for this with your loan servicer after you graduate and before you start repayment. But you can reduce your interest rate by a little bit, 0.25, if you do sign up for auto pay payments. So traditional repayment plans versus income-driven repayment plans. I just want to give you guys like some basics on those. The traditional repayment plans, which are 10 to 25 years, your payment is always going to be based on the total loan amount, the interest rates, and the repayment term. So whether you choose a 10 or a 25-year plan, those traditional repayment plans are meant to pay your loan off in full, including all of the principal balance and the interest. However, on the right-hand side, we have the income-driven repayment plans. On those, your payment is always going to be based on the adjusted gross income, your family size, and your tax filing status. So if you're married, are you filing taxes jointly or separately? And also what repayment plan you're choosing, because there's 4 income-driven repayment plans that you can choose from. Some do allow you to exclude your spouse from the calculation if you file taxes separately. Some of them don't. So that's another thing too that you have to look at. Which repayment plan are you actually going to pick? These plans can provide forgiveness on the loan balance after 20 to 25 years of qualifying payments. The amount forgiven can be considered taxable income. So you do have to keep that in mind because it's not going to be forgiven tax-free like public service loan forgiveness. Why postponing payments can be a costly option. So obviously there's deferment and forbearance. Both are ways to postpone your payments. If you choose a deferment, interest does not accrue on any subsidized loans, but it does accrue on unsubsidized loans. So if you're currently in in-school deferment right now, if you look at your loans, all of the ones that say subsidized, or if you have any Perkins, those won't be accruing any interest during the time that you are at RFU. But if you have any unsubsidized loans, those will continue to accrue interest. Under a forbearance, interest accrues on all your loans. So I have talked sometimes to students that are like, oh my God, how could it be that I accrued so much interest during like 3 years that I put my loans under forbearance? It's possible they just never really did the math before they decided to go with that option. So just make sure that you kind of understand that if you ever do consider that. So lastly, what is student loan refinancing? So student loan refinancing is basically being approved through a private lender they would repay your federal or private student loans and create a new loan for you with a lower interest rate. Some of the pros are that you can select a private lender you want to refinance with because there's many to choose from. You can apply with a cosigner to access lower interest rates if you have a cosigner that has really good credit. A lower interest rate can save you money as it reduces your monthly payment and total interest paid. You don't have to refinance all of your federal student loans. So if you have some really old ones from undergrad that are like at a 3.40 and they're refinancing you at a 4%, you don't have to include the 3.40% loans because obviously it's a better deal to get the lower interest rate with the federal government. So you don't have to include all of them if you don't want to. You can also refinance more than once if you find a better offer. So just because you do it one time doesn't mean you can't do it again. And then some of the cons are that you do need to meet eligibility requirement. So typically they want you to be working and have a good, credit history. There is no access to federal income-driven repayment plans. So if you do need to pay your loans based on your income, you won't be able to do that with a private lender. Repayment term can't be changed unless you refinance again. So say you refinance and you choose a 10-year repayment term, and then a couple years into it, you realize you can't, that's kind of becoming harder to pay. You would have to refinance again in order to extend your repayment term because you can't just be like, oh, can you just put me into a 15-year repayment plan, because you can't just like switch repayment terms. Like whatever you choose, you're going to stick with unless you refinance again. And then there's no access to public service loan forgiveness or income-driven forgiveness. And then lastly, deferment and forbearance options, if you do have any, may not be as flexible as with the federal government. Another thing I want to point out is like this whole coronavirus thing, and how they, launched the CARES Act. Like students that have private student loans are not eligible for that 0% interest rate, and federal student loan borrowers are. So there's always stuff like that that kind of unexpectedly happens where you end up getting, a benefit from having federal student loans because they're typically more, they're just more forgiving overall. And then this is the resources slide. So this is the website where you would have to go to find the PowerPoint, the other resources that we're going to put on there. And I think that there's a video on public service loan forgiveness too that's pretty good on there. So you guys can get those handouts. And then that's basically it. I wanted to see if Hannah had any questions.
I have answered all of the questions in the chat, but we do have a few students who want you to go back to the last slide with the resources.
Oh, yeah. Okay, no problem. So I'll leave it at that. And then don't forget that there's going to be a survey that's going to pop up when you exit the webinar, and it's only going to take like not even a minute. That's why Hannah calls it the 2-second survey.
Yes, 2 seconds it will take you. I think it's like 2 questions.
It's 2 questions, I think.
Yeah. All right, we don't have any more questions. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay, thank you. So thank you guys so much for attending. And if you guys don't have any other questions, you can enjoy the rest of your evening.